Kadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yoma Daf Kaftet Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says as follows. If you remember yesterday, we were talking about that the heat of the sun's rays is worse than the heat of the sun. And then we said also that not only is it the heat, but actually also the rays itself are stronger than the sun itself, which means that because of the clouds, and it's going to make everything all cloudy, so that's going to make it more concentrated in a certain part. So now we're starting today's daf on Kaftet Amud Aleph on the top, 29a1. 29a1. Okay? So now the Gemara says as follows, okay? Hirurei avera kashu me'avera. The thought of an avera is stronger than an avera in itself. Okay? The thoughts of the avera. There's a lot of opinions exactly why. One of the opinion is because if a person comes and it does an avera, okay, they did an avera, but it doesn't affect their neshama as much as hirurei avera, because hirurei avera becomes a part of them. A person comes and he did an action, so the action was not good. Okay, but it's a one-off. But if all the time he's thinking about it, right, that means that that's worse. And the truth is, you even see it, le'avdil elef avdalot, premeditated murder, we all know, is much worse than the murder itself. If a person came and they killed, so fine, they did a terrible act, they'll get punished, whatever you want. For the second that it's chameado, right, it's premeditated, which means that beforehand they came, they thought about it, their entire being is in it. That's it. That's completely different by David. Yeah, it's a different story. So the same thing, hirurei avera is even worse than the avera. Number one, because hirurei avera brings to the avera, and number two, it could be that if they didn't think about it beforehand, okay, so they did an avera, they fell, but they did an avera. But it's not that they're completely always thinking about it. Which one? Is kashim me'avera. Simanech. What's a siman? Reicha de bisra. Reicha de bisra is the smell of meat which is roasted, which is actually very, very bad, right, for the health, right? Even more than if he wouldn't have eaten it, which means that you see from here that the fact that sometimes the smell is stronger than the actual eating of it in itself, right? It could be that maybe it's not good to eat, but the smell of it is even worse. You understand?
Why there's a comparison?
By the way, you should know that, they say the exact same thing sometimes to do with smoking. Smoking, right? They say second-degree smoke is worse than the actual smoker that he's smoking right now. So you have a cigarette and you're coming and you're smoking. So fine, but you don't realize that you're killing the people beside you even more than what you're killing yourself. That's why it's called second, not second degree or second hand. Second hand, no? I forgot.
Because the cigarette has a
Shili de kaita, the end of the kites, right? Kashia bikaita, the end of the summer is actually the strongest of the summer, which means that the heat of the end of the summer is the strongest of the summer. Remember that when you're getting to the end, to the intense, that's when it's the most strongest, right? You see that by anything, labor, right? When a woman gives birth, when is it the strongest contractions? At the end, towards the end, when you're finishing something off. So the same thing, the time when it's the most dark is right before dawn. Yeah, that means that's right, the same thing. Why? Because since the light is going to come and shine forth, that's when it's going to be the most strongest. So the same thing happened with Simanach, Tanura Shegira. What is Tanura Shegira? When you have a tanur, when you have an oven which is on, so it was turned on a few times, it's easier to turn it on again, and you don't need only a little bit of wood. And if you already had an oven that was on a few times, and by the way, you should know, I heard the same thing to do with boiling water. If you take water and you boil it, and let's say it cooled down, it's easier to boil a second time around than if you're going to come and take regular water and start boiling it. So it's the same concept with everything. Ishta distav, right? The kadachat we're talking about over here, the fever of the winter. Yeah, the fever of the winter. He comes and he says, "Is kasha mikaita is even worse than the kadachat of the summer." The simanach tanura kerida, a tanur kar, a cold oven, which means that many times you need a lot of wood in order to heat it up. So too, during the winter time, the body is very, very cold. So since the body is very, very cold, it doesn't bring him, right, to a fever unless it's mamash very bad. You understand? Because basically, if he's already so cold, so for him to get a fever, it has to be very strong in order for him to get a fever. Because if not, the body's already cold. Migmar be'atikta, right? To learn something that you already learned, kashya mechadta is much harder, much more difficult than learning something new. V'simanech tina bartina, which means people always want to learn something new. You don't know what a Yetzirah is. Sometimes people they don't want to learn, but do Chazarah. You know very well, if you learned it once, you're never going to remember it. No, but they want something new. We learned it already. You learned it. Do you remember it? For sure not. You're going to ask him tomorrow. He's already going to forget it. So what? It's a Yetzirah that, no, something new. So he says here, why? He says it's more difficult, right? Do you know that to get into the yeshiva of the Gaon of Vilna, you know what his test was? He used to tell them, okay, open up the Gemara, start learning. So the boy used to come and he started learning the Gemara. When he finished the Sugya, the Gaon said, okay, start again. Yeah, so again, he started again. When he finished, again, he said, start again. Yeah, so he was testing him. He wanted to see if by the third time, the boy was just going to, he already learned it, or he was going to learn it like the first time around. If he was going to learn it like the first time around, he was accepted to the yeshiva. Wow. If he didn't learn it like the first time around, out. He can't. Why? Because in order for us to learn, we have to learn as if we never learned it again. I used to have a Rebbe, that every single time he used to give shiur, and many times in the yeshiva, he used to have a cycle. So many times, whether it's 7 years or 5 years, whatever the cycle was, they used to do again the cycle. So for example, let's say they used to learn Baba Kama, so Baba Kama, and then again, every 5 years or 7, it depends on the different cycles. But sometimes they would do 5 years, sometimes 7 years. Every single time he would learn it, you know what he would do? He would come and he would learn up the Gemara as if he never learned it in his life. And he used to write notes. Then when he finished, he would open up his last notebook and compare. How did I learn it last time? Why is it the last time I learned it this way and this time I learned it this way? Did I learn it the same way? What were chidushim that I didn't see last time, which I did see this time? What did I see this time that I didn't see last time? Like that. That's truly new. That's true learning. Because that means you're actually coming and you're going to learn from it. Amar Abiyavu says Abiyavu. So by the way, the Tina Bartina was a siman because it was a teat which was made out of teat, which means clay, which is made out of clay from like an old wall. So it's much easier, right, to make this clay, right, from a new clay than from using old clay. Meaning it's much easier to do something new than to do something old. Amar Abiyavu says Abiyavu. Maita Amad Rebbe. What's the reasoning of Rebbe? Tichtiv, as it says in a pasuk, Lamnatseach al hayelet hashachar. Yeah, what does that mean? Lamnatseach al hayelet hashachar. Ma ayala zo karnea maftzilot lekan ulekan. Just like this, right? Ayala. How do you translate ayala in English? A how? A hind? Okay. A hind. Okay. The morning hind. Just like this ayelet hashachar, we know that the ayelet hashachar was the perek of Tehillim for Esther Malka. Yeah. So it says just like this morning hind. He says karnea maftzilo lekan ulekan. The horns go on different sides. So to shachar zeh maftzia lekan ulekan. So to the morning, it spreads its rays to the different sides. Okay. So again, we're talking about the morning, the sun, where the sun's rays is going to the different directions, just like the horns. Amar Bizera says Bizera, Lamanim Shala Esther Layala. Why was Esther Malka compared to the Ayala? And this is David HaMelech saying this. So it says, Lo Malecha to tell you, Ma Ayala Rachmat Sar v'Chavival Bala Kol Shah v'Shah Kesha Rishona. He says, do you know that the Ayala, right, the Rachmat Sar, its uterus is very, very narrow. So since it's very, very narrow, she's Chaviva to her husband every single moment, just like the first time around. Because Ki'ilu, it's like it's the first time that the husband is being with her, right? That the Ayala is being with her. So therefore, so to Esther, she was Chaviva on Achashverosh, Kol Shah v'Shah Kesha Rishona. It was always like the first time. Meaning Esther Malka, for Achashverosh, it was always like it was the first time that he lived with her. So that's why she was very, very precious to him. Amar Ravasi, says Ravasi, Lama Nimshala Esther l'Shachar. Why was Esther Malka compared to the Shachar? So it says, L'mar lecha to tell you, Ma Shachar Sof Kol Halayla. Just like the Shachar is going to be the end of the nighttime, so to Esther is the end of all the miracles, right? What does that mean? That even though it wasn't open miracles, right, but it was the end of miracles. So says the Gemara, Vayika Chanukah. 1 second, when was Esther? Esther was between the first and second Bet HaMikdash. When was Chanukah? The end of the second Bet HaMikdash, 200 years before the end of the second Bet HaMikdash. So what are you talking about? There was Chanukah, so there was more miracles. So says the Gemara, Nitena lichtov kamnina. It was the end of all miracles that was given to write, because then we didn't write it anymore. Which means that the last one which was written down was Esther, because Chanukah was not written down anymore. There's no Megillat. You know, there is a Megillat Antiochus. There is, but it's not really a real Megillah, the one that we have as part of the Tanakh. Okay? So says the Gemara, that's good according to the Mandamar that says that you could write Megillat Esther. But according to the Mandamar, that you couldn't write Megillat Esther. What are you going to say? So answers the Gemara, we establish it like Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet in the name of Rabbi Lazar. The Amar Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet Amar Rabbi Lazar. But says Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefet in the name of Rabbi Lazar. Lama nimshelu tefilatan shel tzadikim kayelet. Why is it that the tefillah of the tzadikim is compared to an ayelet? Right? Think about it. Why is it that the tefillah of the tzadikim are compared to this ayelet? So he says, Lomar lecha, to tell you, right? Ma ayala zo, just like this ayala, kol zman shemegadelet. Right? He says, so he says like this, kanea maftzilot. Just like the ayala, the more that it keeps on growing, right? All of a sudden the horns keep on growing to the sides. So to tzadikim, the more that they keep on praying, tfilatan nishmat. The tfilot are going to be answered. Meaning, the more you pray, the more you're answered. Yeah, the more will be heard. Okay, fine. Says the two dots. Yeah, we're on the two dots on the bottom of Kaftet Amud Aleph. Says the two dots. So then what happened is that once it happened and they made a mistake. What was the mistake that they did? The mistake that they did is that they went and they slaughtered the Korban Tamid too early with the light of the moonlight instead of the light of the sun. So shachtu et tamid. So says the Gemara, Eimat, when did this happen exactly? When did it happen that they used the moonlight to slaughter the tamid instead of the sun, and therefore it's disqualified? How is possible? Yeah, no, yes. So says the Gemara, Ilema, if you're going to tell me now it's Mishad Yemot HaShana the rest of the year and it wasn't Yom Kippur, how could it be? Lo Sagia Delav Kohen Gadol. Isn't it that it's not Dai Bekohen Acher, which means it's not a Kohen Gadol? We thought that we learned in the Mishnah, the Sipur of the Takala, that Horidu Kohen Gadol Bet Tefillah, that we took him down to the Bet Tefillah. So therefore, obviously, it says over here, during the rest of the year, any Kohen was kasher to the Avodah. And only on Yom Kippur, it was only done through the Kohen Gadol. So if it's talking about the other days of the year, why do we say that Dafka had to take down the Kohen Gadol to the Bet Tefillah beforehand? Right? Why? So obviously it had to be on Kippur. So says the Gemara, Elav Yom Kippurim, it had to be done on Yom Kippur. So he says, Meor Levana Miika, is there a Levana on Yom Kippur? Why? It's only the 10th of the month. And if it's going to be, because Yom Chagan is Rosh Hashanah, but Kippur is the 10th of the month. But again, it's not like, if you remember yesterday we mentioned, the strongest day of the month is when? The 15th, when you have a full moon. When you have the full moon, that's when you have the strong, the light of the moon. But not on the 10th, right? He says, on the 10th of the month, it's not going to be Me'idah, Samuch L'Shachar. It's not going to be there at the beginning. So he comes and he says as follows. So he comes and he says, Hachi Kamar. This is what it means to say. Uv Yom Kippurim ki amar Barak Barkai. Yeah, when he says about Barak. He left. Okay. Yeah. So on Kippur, when he said Barak Barkai, Horidu Kohen Gadol Levet Tefillah. The second that they went and they said Barak Barkai, that's when they took down the Kohen to do the Tevilah. Meaning that was the starting process. But it wasn't at the right then they did the Korban of Tamid Shel Shachar, but rather the second that he said Barak Barkai, or all the other versions that we learned, if you remember yesterday, all the different versions that they used to say, whichever the version was, but the second that they said it, all of a sudden he used to go down, they used to take him down to the Bet Tevilah. Okay?
That's explanation why they confused the light of the moon with the light of the sun?
No, what happened was when we explained yesterday that what happened is that it was shining very forth. So we started asking that it's not the same light. So yesterday we answered it was a cloudy day. So since it wasn't a cloudy day, so you couldn't tell the difference between the moonlight and the sunlight. Remember, the sunlight usually goes straight, but the moonlight is more, right, is not the same. So we said, right, that it was cloudy. Since it was cloudy, the clouds distorted, right, the moonlight, and therefore they couldn't see if it was going to be sunlight or moonlight. That was what we learned yesterday. Okay? So then we said, Tani Avu ad Rabbi Avi. So we learned in a Braita of Rabbi Avi. Lozu bilvad amru. Not only did they say this, that if they did the korban during the nighttime, that it's going to now need to be burnt. The same halacha would apply to melikata of or kmitzat mincha. Remember, melikata of is that the bird, they didn't do shechita to the bird. The birds were not done shechita. They used to do melika. What was the melika? They used to have their nails, right? The nail of the thumbnail, which was very, very sharp. And with this, they used to do, they used to cut off its neck. Yeah, with a nail. and that's it. Okay, that's called melikat ha'of. So melikat ha'of or kmitzat mincha. Remember that the kmitzah, like this, they used to take the kmitzah. So when they used to take the kmitzat mincha, the flour offering, if it was done at nighttime, also tisaref, you would have to burn whether it's going to be the bird or the flour offering. So says the Gemara, bishlema olat ha'of. I understand olat ha'of that you're going to come and you're going to do this. Maida hava hava, right? Whatever happened, happened, which means that you can't bring the off back to life. The second you kill the bird, you kill the bird. Kaddish. What are you going to do now? You're not going to put the head back on and bring it back to life. Ela komets, but to do the komets, what's the problem? Why? Says on Kaftet Amubet, yeah, nihadra the nehedar nikmetse bimama. Put it back and then take again another kmitza, which means put it back. You could return it and then you bring it back. By the way, you should know we're learning Yilchot Bored now, and the same question applies to Yilchot Bored. If a person is going to come and they are going to start separating, yeah, and they did an isur on Shabbat, they separated. Does it help to put it back and then to take it out the proper way without separating? So there's a whole question in that in the poskim. Yeah, that you took out, you put it back, and then you take out the good instead of the bad, and then maybe you didn't do that, or at least maybe you fixed it. So there's a whole machloke bazeh. Some people are still machmirim, for example, the Ben Ishchai, Kaf HaChaim, and others, but Rav Ovadia is more lenient. That if you put it back, but then he says you didn't help anything. Because since you put everything back, so okay, you did the Yisur, but then you put it back, and then you took it out properly. So then you're okay. So again, it's not that you didn't do it Yisur completely, but at least you're allowed to benefit from it. So here it's the same thing. He's trying to say, you took out the kmitza, it was wrong, because you did it too early. Fine, put it back, and then take it out again during the day. Hu tanila vehu amarla. So he actually taught this and he said it. Kli sharet mekachin afilu shelo bizmano. He said no. What's happening is that when we have kli sharet are the utensils of holiness. So he comes and he says a kli sharet they're mekachin, right? Bigdushat aguf, even without the proper time. Meaning the second that you put something in a kli sharet, which is a utensil, right, of a holy utensil of the Bet HaMikdash, so it makes it holy even though it's not the proper time. Meaning you put it during the nighttime. During the nighttime, it wasn't supposed to be brought. It was supposed to be brought during the morning, not during the nighttime. But still, it's going to become holy. So, so they asked the following question. This is the general rule. Kol hakarev bayom, anything which is going to be brought during the day, kadosh bayom, it's going to be holy during the day. Vechol hakarev balayla, and anything which is going to be brought during the nighttime, yeah, he says, kadosh balayla is going to be holy during the nighttime. V'chol hakarev ben bayom ben balayla, and anything which is going to be brought, whether it's during the day or during the nighttime, kadosh ben bayom ben balayla. So ktani miyat, we did learn though, anything which is brought during the day is only going to be holy during the day. Bayom in balayla, no, only during the day, not during the night. So therefore, the same thing. If right now this mincha cannot be brought during the day, yeah. So therefore, if it cannot be brought during the day, and you put it now in a kli sharet during the nighttime, it shouldn't become holy. It should not. Should not. Yeah, it should not become holy. But since it's only brought during the day, it should only be during the day. So answers the Gemara, Dilma eno kadosh li karev, aval kadosh li pasel. He says, no, maybe be'emet, it's not kadosh li karev, to be brought, but it's kadosh li pasel. It's kadosh to become pasul, right? But not to li karev. Okay? So he comes and he says, which means it's not kadosh to be brought to the mizbeach, but it is kadosh to become pasul. Okay? So Mativ Rabbi Zira comes going to ask the following question. Imagine right now you went and you put the lechem and the bazichin after the Shabbat, which means, remember, lechem apanim was taken off on Shabbat. And then it was divided between the mishmar nichas and mishmar yotzeh. And what happened was that you came and you put on the sidur of the lechem apanim, right, for the next Shabbat, yeah, you put it on, and the bazichin after the Shabbat, right? So he says, you put the bazichin and you put it after the Shabbat. So he comes and he says, V'iktir et bazichin b'Shabbat, psula. Now, if you went and you brought the bazichin on the Shabbat, it's going to be pasul. So Keitzad Yaseh, how are you going to do? Yanichenu, you place the lechem apanim on the shulchan, and you don't take it off on that Shabbat. Okay? But rather, you're going to bring the bazichim, another bazichin, and you put it with the bread until the Shabbat Abba. Shafilu amdala shulchan yamim rabim, because even if it's going to be that it was there for many days, nothing happens. Meaning, if you leave the lechem apanim there longer, nothing will happen. So says the Gemara, why? Tikdosh v'tipasel. it should become kadosh and it should become pasul. So says the Gemara, Rava says, Man de kamotiv, shapir kamotiv. The one that asked the question was actually asking a very good question. And also the father of Rabbi Avin also was saying a braita. The kasavar, and he held, Laila em mechusar zman, Yom mechusar zman. He says nighttime, which means, right, Laila, which is before, right, that time, it's not mechusar zman, it's not lacking time. But Yom, the daytime, is lacking time, which means it's not the proper time, right, to become kadosh. So kli sharet, any holy utensil, is not going to be mekadesh shelo bizmana, filu lipasel, even to make it pasul. So because of that, also the lechem aparim, which is placed on the shulchan on the first day, is not going to be mukdash through the shulchan, and it's not going to become pasul. Okay? So says the Gemara, kimate b'shimshe, right, when it's going to come the night of Shabbat, tiktosh v'tifsol, make it holy, and then it should become pasul. So says the Gemara, Ravina says, shekadam v'silko. We're talking about where you came and you already took it off. Okay? Which means that you took it off on Yom Shishi, Samuch L'Erev Shabbat. So it comes out that on the night of Shabbat, right, he says when it's already the time that it could become holy, right, the lechem wasn't there anymore. So Mimela, it didn't become Kadosh, it become Pasul. Marzutra V'itei Ravashi Amar. Marzutra, and some people say it's Ravashi said, Afilu Tema, even if you're going to tell me, he comes and he says, B'shelo kadam v'silko. If you didn't take it off, and right, you didn't take it off beforehand, Kevan shesidro shelo k'mitzato, since you put it not according to the mitzvah, Nasa kemo shesidro akof. It's like a kof one. Meaning, if you didn't do it the proper way, it's like a monkey came and a monkey put it on because it wasn't done in the proper way. So therefore, right, it's not there. There's nothing there. Okay? Fine. This is a general rule. So we said in the Mikdash, anybody that used to do his number one, so he had to do Kiddush Adam Raglaim. If he did number two, he had to do Tevilah. So Bishma Raglaim, I understand that if the person did number one, so he has to do Kiddush Adam Raglaim. But he says over here, but you have to do Raglaim because of Nitzotzot. Which means when the person does number one, right, what happens is that there's sprinkles, meaning that the urine comes and it could sprinkle on his leg. Now, on his leg, right, it's a problem. Why? Because if it goes on his legs, remember, people are going to say that maybe all his children are mamzerim. Why? Because if he's doing number one and it sprinkles on his legs, it means that he's a krut shovcha. Krut shovcha means that there's a cut in his eved, in his organ, in his male organ. And if there's a cut in the male organ, he can't have children. So now all of a sudden they come and they see that the wife was pregnant and she had children. So for what is there? So obviously they're mamzerim. So because of that, a person has to be careful to do with that. There's no sprinkles on his, meaning there's no, like of the urine drops on his feet. So he says, but why does he have to wash his hands? So Amar Rabbi Abba says, Rabbi Abba, you see from here, mitzvah l'shafshef. It's a mitzvah to wash your hands, to be mishafshef, the nitzitzot, the meraglayim, right, on the legs and that time. So a kohen that he comes and he starts putting waters and then he's taking away the nitzitzot, for sure his hands are going to become dirty. So because of that, that's why he has to do kiddush adam raglaim in order to get rid of this. And Bezrat Hashem, we continue tomorrow.